The Hall of Concord had been designed to intimidate. Its ceiling rose 100 meters overhead, a lattice of alien alloys that shimmered with cold blue light. Tiered galleries circled the chamber, packed with instructors, observers, and dignitaries from more than 40 species. At the center stood the cadets, 300 of the most promising young officers the Coalition had ever gathered, arranged in perfect ranks, armored boots aligned to the millimeter. This was where futures were decided. Supreme Marshal Kethrix of the Valari stepped forward, his elongated form towering over the cadets. His chitinous crest flared with confidence as his voice echoed through the chamber. "Today," he announced, "you will select your trainers." A ripple of anticipation moved through the ranks. This was the moment every cadet had prepared for since childhood. The trainers before them represented the pinnacle of Coalition warfare, living legends whose victories were taught as doctrine. Holographic platforms ignited around the hall. A Zelthian warmind materialized first, its multiple cybernetic limbs bristling with weapons. It had dismantled entire planetary defenses in hours. Next came a Thraxian dual matron, scarred and massive, famous for breaking enemy morale through sheer brutality. Then a core ascendant strategist appeared, its neural halo glowing as it calculated outcomes faster than most species could think. The cadets watched in awe. Some struggled to keep their composure. And finally, at the far end of the chamber, the last platform activated. No hologram. Just a man. He stood slightly apart from the others, hands clasped behind his back, posture relaxed to the point of disrespect. He wore a simple dark uniform, unadorned except for a small, faded insignia on the shoulder, so worn it was almost unrecognizable. No visible weapons. No cybernetic enhancements. No dramatic presentation. A few cadets exchanged confused glances. "That's the human," someone whispered. Kethrix allowed himself a thin, amused click. "Yes. That is Instructor Elias Ward. Species designation, human. Formerly of Earth's Unified Defense Forces." A low murmur spread through the hall. Humans were tolerated. Recent entrants into the galactic stage. Physically unimpressive. Short-lived. Emotionally volatile. Their survival on a so-called death world was considered an evolutionary curiosity, not a mark of superiority. Ward, meanwhile, appeared entirely uninterested in the proceedings. His gray hair was cropped short, his face lined with age and old fatigue. He looked more like a retired administrator than a master of war. The alien trainers radiated power. The human radiated nothing at all. "Cadets," Kethrix continued, voice heavy with authority, "step forward and choose. Once chosen, your trainer will shape not only your skills, but your understanding of warfare itself." The signal tone sounded. For a brief moment, no one moved. Then something unexpected happened. One cadet stepped out of formation. She was a Kessari, avian, light-boned, quick-minded. Top of her class in tactical simulations. Observers leaned forward, assuming she would select the ascendant strategist. Instead, she walked past it. Past the warmind. Past the dual matron. She stopped in front of the human. Without hesitation, she sat down. Not knelt. Not bowed. She sat cross-legged at his feet. The hall fell silent. Kethrix's crest stiffened. "Cadet," he snapped, "explain your decision." The Kessari looked up, eyes sharp. "Yes, Supreme Marshal. In the simulations, the human instructor's scenarios had the lowest survival rate." A ripple of approval moved through the observers. Sensible logic. She continued, "They also had the highest long-term victory rate." Murmurs turned to uneasy whispers. Before Kethrix could respond, another cadet stepped forward. Then another. And another. One by one, cadets from different species broke formation and walked, not ran, not hesitated, toward the human. They Saturday. Soon, the floor before Elias Ward was filled. Every single cadet. The other trainers stood abandoned on their platforms, holograms flickering uselessly. Shock rippled through the chamber like a physical force. "This is absurd," hissed a Thraxian observer. "They choose weakness." Ward finally moved. He looked down at the cadets gathered around him, studying their faces with calm, unreadable eyes. Then he glanced up at Kethrix. "Permission to speak," Ward said evenly. The Supreme Marshal hesitated. Granting a human authority in this chamber felt wrong. Granted. Ward nodded once. You didn't choose me because I'm the strongest, he said, voice carrying without amplification. You chose me because I don't promise you victory. The cadets listened, utterly still. I promise you survival. I promise you adaptation. And I promise you that whatever the enemy thinks war is, his gaze hardened. We will redefine it. Silence followed. Then, somewhere high in the galleries, an observer whispered a single word, one that carried a hint of unease. Dangerous. Elias Ward allowed himself the faintest smile. And far beyond the Hall of Concord, unseen and unconcerned, the galaxy continued under the comfortable illusion that humans were still learning how war worked. That illusion would not survive the training. By the next cycle, the Hall of Concord was still echoing with disbelief. Coalition Command tried to mask its reaction with procedure, but no amount of formality could hide the truth. The training schedule had been rewritten overnight. Entire wings of the Academy were reassigned. Observation committees multiplied. Risk assessors filed objections that were promptly ignored. All 300 cadets had formally requested reassignment under a single human instructor. Elias Ward did not comment on the controversy. He simply reported for duty. The human training wing was smaller than the others, tucked into a utilitarian section of the Academy that had once been used for logistics simulations. No grand arenas. No gravity-shifting combat domes. Just plain rooms, reinforced walls, and a scattering of outdated equipment. Several alien instructors watched from a distance as the cadets assembled. This will correct itself, one Valari tactician muttered. They will abandon him within days. Ward entered without ceremony. He did not stand on a platform or demand attention. He took a seat on the edge of a table, set a small data slate beside him, and looked at the cadets as though counting something invisible. Before we start, he said, I want to know why you're here. No one answered immediately. Finally, a massive Thraxian raised a claw. To learn how humans fight. Ward shook his head. Wrong. A murmur rippled through the group. A core cadet spoke next, neural halo pulsing. To learn unconventional strategy. Closer, Ward said. Still wrong. Silence returned. Ward stood, slow and deliberate. You're here because every system you've been taught assumes the enemy will behave rationally, predictably, according to doctrine. He tapped the slate once, and the room lights dimmed. A projection filled the air, a coalition fleet advancing in flawless formation against an enemy force that was clearly outmatched. This is how the galaxy fights, Ward continued. Perfect plans, clean lines, calculated risk. The projection changed. The same fleet, now crippled. Ships burning. Communications shattered. What changed? Ward asked. The Kessari cadet from the selection spoke up. The enemy ignored expected behavior. They sacrificed assets, another added. They abandoned territory. Ward nodded. They stopped trying to win the battle and focused on surviving the war. He let that settle. Human history is full of defeats, Ward said. We lost cities, fleets, planets. What we didn't lose was the ability to adapt. He gestured toward the projection again. This time, it showed a human fleet, outnumbered, poly-armed, scattered. Then it showed something else. Ambush vectors, feigned retreats, delayed detonations triggered weeks after retreat, supply lines collapsing without a single direct engagement. The alien cadets leaned forward. This isn't strength, Ward said. This is inconvenience weaponized. A Thraxian growled softly. You fight like scavengers. Ward met the creature's gaze without flinching. We fight like survivors. The first exercise began immediately. There were no weapons, no armor. Ward divided the cadets into mixed species teams and gave them a single instruction: reach the far end of the facility within 1 hour. The corridors between were intentionally disorganized: dead ends, locked doors, surveillance drones, and simulated environmental failures. The cadets moved with confidence at first, relying on standard formation tactics. They failed within minutes. Drones isolated their leaders. Locked passages separated teams. Environmental hazards forced retreats that doctrine had no answer for. Ward watched from a control room, arms crossed. Again, he said calmly. The second attempt was worse. Frustration mounted. Voices rose. One core cadet demanded clearer parameters. Ward denied the request. Ward doesn't give you clarity, he said. It gives you consequences. On the third attempt, something changed. A smaller species volunteered to act as bait. A Thraxian blocked a corridor not to fight, but to slow pursuit. A Kessari rerouted power manually instead of waiting for system access. They reached the endpoint with seconds to spare. Ward nodded once. Acceptable. That single word carried more weight than praise. By the end of the cycle, the cadets were exhausted. Not physically, mentally. They had been forced to question instincts drilled into them since birth. Watching from the observation deck, Supreme Marshal Kethrix felt a slow, unfamiliar discomfort. He dismantles them without firing a shot, an aide whispered. Kethrix did not respond. He was watching Elias Ward review data alone, making notes, already planning the next lesson. For the first time since humanity joined the coalition, the galaxy was beginning to understand something it had missed. Humans did not train for victory. They trained for what came after everything went wrong. By the third training cycle, rumors had outpaced official reports. What began as disbelief had evolved into concern. Coalition instructors no longer dismissed the human wing as a temporary anomaly. They watched it closely now, standing in quiet clusters along observation corridors, their expressions tightening each time the cadets emerged exhausted but unmistakably sharper. Elias Ward had not increased the difficulty of his exercises. He had removed certainty. The day's lesson began without warning. The cadets assembled as usual, only to find their standard briefing room dark and empty. No instructions. No projection. No sign of their instructor. Minutes passed. A Valari cadet finally spoke. This violates protocol. A low tremor rippled through the floor. Emergency lighting flared red. A synthetic voice echoed through the facility. Simulation breach. Command authority unavailable. The doors sealed. Some cadets reached instinctively for weapons that were not there. Ward's voice came through the overhead system, calm and unhurried. You have been cut off from command, logistics, and reinforcement. Assume this condition is permanent. A pause. Begin. The facility transformed. Walls shifted. Gravity fluctuated in uneven pulses. Environmental systems failed in stages rather than all at once, creating pockets of breathable air separated by vacuum corridors. The cadets reacted as they had been trained, establishing command hierarchy, assigning sectors, attempting to restore systems. Every effort triggered a new complication. Restoring power drew hostile drones. Centralizing leadership made it vulnerable to isolation. Defensive positions became traps when gravity inverted without warning. Stop reacting, the Kessari cadet shouted at last. We're playing their game. She was ignored. 10 minutes later, half the group was functionally eliminated. Ward watched from a remote chamber, hands folded, eyes sharp. He said nothing. Eventually, survival instincts overcame doctrine. A core cadet deliberately severed a corridor rather than defend it, forcing the simulation to reroute threats. A Thraxian shattered a support column, not to attack, but to change the geometry of pursuit. Smaller species moved through maintenance shafts that larger ones could not access, carrying information instead of weapons. The group fractured into cells. Efficiency improved. Losses slowed. Still, they failed. When the simulation ended, the cadets expected reprimand. They received none. Ward entered the chamber quietly, stepping over scorch marks and collapsed panels. He surveyed the damage with mild interest. You lost, he said. Again. No one argued. Why? He asked. A Valari answered reluctantly. We tried to preserve the system. Ward nodded. Correct. And wrong. He paced slowly, boots echoing against alloy flooring. You've been taught that systems are sacred. That order is protection. That collapse must be prevented at all costs. He stopped. Humans learn something different. The room was silent. Systems fail, Ward continued. Every one of them. The question is whether they fail on your terms or the enemy's. He activated a projection. It showed an ancient human battle, grainy, Chaotic, undocumented by coalition standards. Forces retreating, cities abandoned, command structures dissolving. Then the image shifted. Supply routes vanished. Enemy formations stretched thin. Communication delays multiplied. The enemy won every battle. They lost the war. You don't need to control everything, Ward said. You need to control what matters. A Thraxian rumbled, uncertain. And what matters? Ward met his gaze. People. Time. Will. The next exercise removed even more structure. No teams. No objectives. Each cadet was given a personal scenario, conflicting goals, limited information, and moral constraints that could not be optimized away. Saving one group meant abandoning another. Completing the mission meant violating standing orders. Some froze. Others broke. One cadet shut down entirely when forced to choose between preserving civilian assets and maintaining strategic position. Ward intervened only once. He paused the simulation for a single cadet, a young Valari whose crest trembled with indecision. Why can't you decide? Ward asked quietly. The choice weakens us, the cadet said. Ward leaned closer. So does indecision. Only one of those teaches you something. The simulation resumed. By the end of the cycle, no one felt victorious. They felt changed. From the observation deck, Supreme Marshal Kethrix watched with growing unease. They are becoming unpredictable, an aide said. Kethrix did not look away. No, he replied slowly. They are becoming resilient. Below, Elias Ward dismissed the cadets without ceremony. As they filed out, bruised in spirit rather than body, none noticed the human linger behind, reviewing outcome trees that branched into thousands of imperfect solutions. He erased most of them. War, Ward knew, did not reward perfection. It rewarded those who could still act when the shape of failure became unavoidable. And the galaxy was far closer to that shape than it realized. The weeks passed, and the cadets were no longer just surviving, they were learning to thrive in chaos. Elias Ward's training had evolved from exercises into something far more subtle, a test of perception, intuition, and adaptability. The cadets were no longer reacting to obvious threats, they were learning to anticipate the invisible. The day began with an ordinary briefing. The cadets assembled, expecting their usual scenarios, only to find Ward waiting in the open corridor, arms crossed, a faint smile playing across his lips. Today, he said, we fight an enemy you cannot see. You do not know their numbers, their strength, or even their intent. Your only advantage is your own judgment. He gestured toward the training arena. On the surface, it appeared empty, a grid of open corridors, reinforced walls, and scattered obstacles. No holograms, no drones, no visible adversaries. A memo passed through the cadets. This was different, unpredictable, subtle, dangerous. Ward continued. You will move through the arena in teams, but do not assume cooperation. Some of your peers will be tasked with objectives you may not know. Success is not guaranteed. Survival depends on improvisation, communication, and perception. The cadets hesitated. For the first time, some doubted whether they could succeed. Questions. Ward asked. Silence. Good. Begin. Immediately, cadets dispersed into the maze. At first, they moved cautiously, scanning every corridor, expecting mechanical traps or obverse threats. Hours passed. Nothing occurred. Confusion crept in. They began second-guessing every decision. Then subtle cues appeared, a flicker of a light, a soft vibration underfoot, a displaced panel. Tiny indicators, easy to overlook, yet each contained vital information. The cadets who observed carefully could anticipate challenges before they manifested. Those who relied on brute force or reaction were slowed or eliminated from consideration. One core cadet, cerebral and analytical, recognized a pattern in the signals. He mapped it silently, guiding his group through dead ends and ambush points. The Thraxian heavy lifter relied on instinct, using raw strength to manipulate the environment in ways others did not anticipate. The Kessari scout slipped through hidden passages, quietly observing and reporting movement patterns. Meanwhile, Ward watched from above, noting each choice, each misstep, each improvisation. He said nothing. He did not intervene. Hours into the exercise, the first signs of alien skepticism filtered through the observation galleries. Coalition trainers muttered among themselves, "These humans, they are learning too fast." Ward's subtle lesson was beginning to unfold. Information was everywhere, but perception determined value. Those who adapted to the invisible signals gained an advantage unseen by any traditional measure of strength. At one point, a misstep triggered a simulated trap, a corridor flooded with smoke, sensors blaring. Panic threatened to take hold. The cadets who had observed patterns calmly redirected others, forming small, effective contingents that continued toward their goals. The exercise concluded without fatalities, though several cadets were disoriented, exhausted, and humbled. Ward stepped into the arena, eyes scanning the teams. "You were slow," he said. "Some of you hesitated when the path was obvious. Others moved blindly, confident they were correct. The difference between them is not intelligence. It is awareness." He gestured toward the observation deck, where Kethrix watched, tension evident in every line of his chitinous face. The unseen is always the decisive factor. Those who can perceive it and act without hesitation will always hold the advantage. The cadets filed out, silently absorbing the lesson. They had survived, yes, but more importantly, they had begun to think differently. The galaxy had taught them rules of combat and strategy. Ward taught them the gaps between those rules. Alone, Ward reviewed the outcome logs. Each team had exhibited small victories, yet none had mastered the arena fully. That was the point. Perfection was impossible. Adaptability was everything. Kethrix left the observation deck slowly, unease growing. The humans were not merely surviving, they were evolving. And somewhere in the shadows, Ward allowed himself the faintest grin. The galaxy believed it understood war. It did not. Not yet. And the humans were going to change that. The final cycle of training dawned with a quiet intensity. No announcements. No fanfare. The cadets gathered in the central hall, their armor and uniforms immaculate, but their eyes sharper than ever. Every gesture, every posture hinted at a combination of anticipation and wariness. Elias Ward stood at the center, a calm presence amid the subdued mammoths. His face betrayed nothing, yet his eyes, gray, seasoned, and calculating, held a subtle promise. Today, nothing would be ordinary. "Cadets," he began, voice steady, measured, "everything you've learned, every lesson, every failure, every improvisation, comes to this. Not as individuals, not as isolated units, but as a human force." He paused. "You will face a simulation unlike any before. Complete intelligence obfuscation. Dynamic, unpredictable threats. Strategic objectives that contradict one another. Resources that fluctuate at every turn. You will be outnumbered, outgunned, and under constant pressure. Survival is optional. Adaptation is mandatory." The cadets absorbed this, nodding in silent acknowledgement. No one doubted Ward's words. By now, they had internalized the principle. Predictability was weakness, improvisation, power. The simulation began. The arena had been transformed completely. Shifting walls, optical distortions, and concealed obstacles created an environment that even experienced observers admitted would frustrate the most seasoned teams. The first wave of challenges struck immediately, an ambush triggered by an unseen force, forcing cadets to scatter. Some attempted standard formations. They failed. Others applied lessons from Ward's prior exercises, splitting into flexible units, communicating silently, exploiting invisible cues, and advanced with precision. The human cadets executed maneuvers that seemed counterintuitive at first, yet every movement was purposeful. The Kessari scout detected patterns invisible to others, guiding squads along paths that appeared blocked. The Thraxian's brute strength was applied strategically to reroute obstacles rather than force confrontation. The core cadets calculated trajectories and probability, diverting attacks before they occurred. Ward observed silently, noting each decision. The outcome would not be determined by firepower or numbers. It would be intelligence applied in real time. Midway through the simulation, a sudden crisis emerged. Critical resources, power cores and communication arrays, were simultaneously compromised. Standard protocol demanded immediate recovery. Most cadets began to scramble, prioritizing what they could reach first. Ward spoke into the central channel, calm yet deliberate. Pause. Consider consequences. Not everything can be retrieved. Choose what matters most. The cadets hesitated, then began coordinating. Decisions were made quickly but deliberately. Some objectives were sacrificed to preserve what was strategically vital. The simulation shifted dynamically as human cadets adapted. Exploiting weaknesses in the design itself, obstacles turned into tools, threats turned into distractions, limitations turned into opportunities. Hours passed. Each cadet group faced moral dilemmas, tactical dead ends, and conflicting priorities. Yet they emerged intact, not through luck, but through deliberate choice and collective ingenuity. As the simulation concluded, Ward walked among them. "Observe," he said. "Victory is not defined by elimination. It is defined by what survives, by what is preserved, by how you respond when every expectation fails." The cadets, exhausted yet invigorated, understood. They had been tested to the absolute limit of strategy, adaptability, and resolve. And in every case, human ingenuity had prevailed, not through force, but through perception, improvisation, and moral clarity. From the observation deck, Supreme Marshal Kethrix finally spoke, his voice low and tense. "They are extraordinary." Ward allowed a faint smile. "They were never meant to follow the rules," he said. "They were meant to redefine them." The cadets filed out, victorious in a way no alien instructor had predicted. They had learned the fundamental lesson of human warfare. Success was not about overpowering the enemy. It was about outthinking, outlasting, and surviving when all odds were against them. And beyond the walls of the Hall of Concord, across the galaxy that had long underestimated humanity, the consequences of that lesson were only beginning to ripple outward. Humans did not merely adapt. Humans evolved. And no one would forget it.